It's the conference of your dreams with special guest Reverend Dr. Jason Brian Santos on this episode of Play Saves the World, the ongoing conversation on spirituality and games. Hello and welcome everybody to Play Saves the World. My name is Daniel Hilty.
My name is Kevin Taylor.
And I am Jason Santos.
Jason, welcome.
Thank you.
We are so glad to have you here talking about the conference of your dreams, at least especially for the listeners of this podcast, which we'll be getting into in just a little bit. We're so excited to have you be with us and talking about a really exciting conference coming up. But first, Kevin, if people like this kind of conversation about play and theology and spirituality and games and religion and all that good stuff, what can they do to help make it possible?
Number one, you could tell a friend.
One.
Number two, you can like and subscribe. Check us out on YouTube and make sure you're liking, subscribing, leave a comment in your podcast player of choice. Number three, you could help sponsor us and cover some of the costs at patreon.com/PlaySavesTheWorld.
Perfect.
That was my radio voice.
That was a great radio voice. I feel like I'm listening to Casey Kasem in the top 40. Speaking of an old man reference.
Via James McAvoy. The fans are cold this evening.
We do appreciate all of the support, including just listening today. All of our listeners and viewers, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to listen to the conversation or watch us on YouTube. We really appreciate it. It means more than we can tell you, and we hope all is well in your corner of the world. Jason, we hope all is well in your corner of the world. We're all on different time zones. You were saying you got the short end of the stick today. You had to get up earliest of all for this recording. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't normally function until about 10 in the morning, but I walked the dog early, so I'm ready for this.
Great. Well, we appreciate it. You are here to talk about a really exciting conference, and we're going to get a lot more into that. But just if you could give our listeners just a little nutshell so they're not left wondering for too long, what kind of conference are we talking about, please?
It's called the Theology of Play Conference. We all call it TopCon. And actually, as we started that out originally, we called it TopCon around a conversation. We called it Theology of Play Conversation. And then and that was happened in 2018. There were about 6 Presbyterian hobby game designers. We came together to try to design a game around intergenerational formation. We met in Portland, Oregon in 18, and then the next year we launched a physical version of TopCon at the Manuka Conference Center in just outside of Portland, Oregon. Same place the first group met, and that's when it moved into a conference. As I like to tell the story, I was overseeing Christian formation for the denomination in our national headquarters, and I had about $10,000 in a budget line item that was not being used. And I went to my supervisor and I said, could I use this to make a conference around board games and theology and play? And he's like, go for it. So we actually ran it kind of like a Kickstarter. We gave people 2 weeks to sign up, about 30 people, and we ended up in the 40s. But yeah, we held a 3 full day with two days on the end, sort of travel days, and we were able to subsidize the conference. It was really inexpensive. It was like $150 for the whole conference, and we had financial aid for services come in and fly people in. So we had a lot of funding for that first one, but we gathered together. Phil Walker Harding was our guest speaker. I had met Phil on Facebook many years ago when I discovered that he had a master's in theology, and it said very small print in the back of his game, Imhotep. And I just reached out to him on Facebook and said, you're a professional game designer and an armchair theologian, and I am a professional theologian and a armchair software designers. So we sort of hit off a friendship, and we brought him and his wife up, and they spent the time with us, and yeah, and
From
it's
New
sort of
Zealand, right? Like they're
all
from
from Australia, Sydney, Australia.
Okay.
So yeah, we brought him up, and he spent about a week in Portland before, and sort of toured a little bit, and then came and spent the time with us, and then flew back, and then Phil has actually been. We met the following year online, because that was a COVID year in November of 2020, and we did a 13-hour online conference where we played roll and write games together. And there was probably, I don't know, there was, I think, 30 some people that joined in for that, and we played roll and write games. And there was a little online thing called Among Us. I don't know if you saw that back then. A little,
Yep.
We
Among Us.
We were playing Among Us in between the breaks, and Phil lectured, I lectured, someone else shared, and so it was a good time. But then COVID hit, and we kind of it died down. And then the past couple of years, I've been taking care of my mother, who has vascular dementia in our home, and that has sort of just weighed. It's it felt its weight in that, and sort of the impetus for keeping it going sort of was put on the back burner. But last year, in 2024, we did a light launch. We only had we decided like a month and a half before we started the day. My friend said, "Hey, we have an extra window open for a conference. Do you want to come do something? Let's do TopCon." So we pulled it together. There weren't a huge amount of us in the teens, but we gathered, we played, and honestly, as I shared earlier, in my formal job in the national office, it was my job to be at or plan or lead 25 to 30 conferences a year. Wow. And without a doubt, TopCon has been my favorite conference for connection, for fellowship, for long-term relationships and friendships. It's just it provides something that so many other conferences don't.
And here's the entry point. Why?
Yeah.
Why does this work more than getting a bunch of pastors and elders together?
Because at a typical conference, and you all are Methodist, I'm Presbyterian, anyone in the mainline conference, sometimes if the conference is in a hotel, it's even worse. You walk in, you check into your room, and you go up to your hotel room, and then you're like, well, where do I go? If the expo hall isn't open or something, you're like, if I go down to the lobby and I don't see someone I know, then I feel socially awkward. So a lot of times people will stay in their hotel rooms until the meetings start. And then there's no time to see people or engage with people because they're finding a seat and they end up communicating with those around them. I just think, and even at retreat conferences, I think the same thing is true. Those who know people tend to hang out in the lobby and greet people, but those who don't have no entry point into any sort of connective, relational sort of activities. And even at TopCon, before we even begin registration, registration I think technically begins like at 4:30 on the day that it starts, but we usually have open gaming from 2 on. And we invite everyone to bring games, and so there's just giant table of board games that people usually bring 3 to 5 games, and so you have dozens and dozens of games to choose from, and so many. We ask people to bring games that they know how to teach, games that they maybe from their game of their shelf of shame that they want to get people to play, and so we give them a couple categories. But no, again, so when the minute you walk into a conference, if all of a sudden you have a third thing to enter into at the end of that 15 minutes, half an hour, whatever your game, you've now made 3 or 4 friends. And then the next time you go, you walk into the room and you see them, and so I think by the end of it, you leave with a greater sense of connectivity to those attendees at the conference, as opposed to even at a 30 or 40 person conference that's just at a conference center. You may leave connecting with a small handful of people. You eat lunch and dinner with those same people. You may mingle a little bit, but the interaction, the intermingling over the game table is unparalleled.
The magic of games, the power of games. Yeah.
I have seen that. I've seen that at some board game conventions I've gone to, especially Tantrum Con, which is the one here in Charlotte, which is my nearest one. And it's, I don't know, is it 1,500 or so? But you show up for breakfast and people are like, hey, if you're not busy, we're about to start this game. Come join us, find us in the exhibition hall. Like, people are actively looking for gamers. They're inviting you. And so I was just busting out with friends, and it was great because I was there on my own. And I went on my own to PAX Unplugged, and that is 16,000, and that one is not nearly as inviting. I had one way in, and there were people playing in the lobby of the hotel, and they would invite you in, but that one is so massive, you're really lost. You need a tribe.
And I kind of feel like sometimes, those larger conferences have, and obviously when you get to Gen Con and Origins and Essen, those sort of things, the biggest thing that you see coming out of those on social media is people sharing what they bought. And then playing almost becomes the preview for, do I want to buy this game, or I'm interested in buying this game, and I'm going to get someone to teach it to me. And I think that there's part of me that loathes that culture, that because it becomes so much about consumerism, and trust me, I have a 550 plus board game collection, so I have over 20 years, invested myself. But that sense of leaving with 40 games from a conference, and maybe you will play them, but I've tried, that's over. I've bought games over almost 25 years in this hobby. So when you put it in that perspective, it's not that many in terms of, and I probably have a dozen or 20 that I haven't played on my shelf of shame. But the notion that you dig into a game and you experience a game and you don't just say what's the next best thing, and it's one of the things that I sort of lament about the gaming culture is it's always what is next.
Right.
That's a spot on lament that we have struggled with too. And when is it enough? So it's just the human condition, right? We're just these leaky vessels, and we want to play the next new thing. And sometimes that is awesome because it's a new mechanic or a new type of game. But yeah, the whole hobby is often oriented towards the fear of missing out and the shiny new thing. And I've got enough games for the rest of my life.
For the rest of your life, So do I need another game that uses polyomino pieces? No, but I would say, and I would say that just pulling back to TopCon real quick, part of the reason I think that people don't go by, there's no games to purchase. This year, our speaker is Greg Loring Albright, who is the designer of Ahoy by Leader Games. He does Block by Block, which is a social insurrection game, but his newest game coming out is Keep the Faith through Michigan University Publishing or something like that. And what I love about TopCon is there is no purchasing, there's no buying. You leave with a list. I'm going to go and pick these games up after, but you have so many games to choose from. You have people to teach them, and honestly, because we have so many sessions that center around the conversation of a theology of play and what is a theology of play and how do games impact our lives and everything around that, that actually feeds conversations that happen during and over those games. And so it's not that you're playing games. As you're playing them, you're actually talking about the significance of the games in your life, and you're sort of realizing in real time, this is important. And sometimes even board gamers who play board games don't think about the significant role that games play in their lives.
Yes.
And so we're trying to raise that conversation. So yeah, Greg Loring Albright will be this year. I know that at the end you'll probably say, what do you want to promote? But I'll say it now. TopCon there's a Facebook group that is probably the easiest way to join. And then Stony Point Conference Center in Stony Point, New York is where it's being held, and they have a website that has all the information on it. We don't have a website. We're not that big yet. But what I will say just to your listeners is we've arranged for a $50 off registration code, and the code is PLAYSAVES, all one word. And you enter that in, you'll get $50 off your registration. You get a free game of Keep the Faith. Greg Loring Albright will be there all week to interact. Phil Walker Harding will be coming in. I'll be teaching on a theology of play at some point. We invite our participants to teach if they have something they want to share. They're more than welcome to come, and we'll create a workshop space for them. And there's lots more involved, and they can find out more about that at stonypoint.org or at the TopCon Facebook group. Just TopCon with I think it might have an exclamation point in it, but no, yeah. So if anyone is interested in theology of play, I know I'm a Presbyterian, you all are Methodists. I don't know, I'm sure you have a lot of mainline folk out there. We like to dig into the crunchiness of what it means to be creatures who play. So
it just sounds like the best of all possible worlds. It sounds amazing.
I love it. My 14-year-old
Yeah,
son is going this year because I finally want to bring him into the fold of
it's
this conference. So
That's great.
Jason, you've talked about theology of play. How would you define that for yourself? Do you have a working definition of theology of play, or what's the significance of games in your faith and your
yeah.
journey?
I don't know when I started thinking about the theology of play. I think it probably had to do. I developed. I'm a hobby game designer. I've been doing it for I think the better part of probably since 2010. I started tinkering with it, and I've developed some stuff for denominations, for Spark House curriculums, for Fuller Seminary. I've worked with a number of curriculum houses or publication houses that are producing activities or games. And so I haven't really done a whole lot with that, but as I got into I'm nothing professionally produced, but as I got into the world of game design, I just started thinking more and more readily about how games impact or influence us, and how much of my own brain it was, and my own senses and my own capacities it was using in order to sort of design. And I think historically, and actually, I have sort of gone through a bit of a transformation. I would probably say since 2016 or so, I've been talking about the theology of play as I started to dabble with it, a little more in the lines of we all were created in the image of God, and that image of God included play, this aspect of playfulness, and we can tease that out into what that exactly is in terms of what it might have been in a garden setting. I like to think of as God was walking in the cool of the evening with Adam and Eve, with our first parents, whether you see them as literal or metaphorical, whether this image of this triune God. I like to imagine it as sort of frolicking naked, skipping through the forest naked, without any fear of thorns or thistles snagging you. But that playful spirit just of presence. And I started with that, and and then it was the notion of that God created us in God's image, and that included this aspect of play that was also a part of God. Now, saying that, as we look at the history of Christian theology around the image of God, it tends to be things like rationality, relationality, creativity, rational thought, logic, innovation, self-reflection or self-awareness into the last century with the Niebuhr brothers. But that notion, and so all of these things really sort of, for years I was teaching that, these are the facets of the image of God in us, and they're enlivened in the activity of a game. And then I would juxtapose that often with, where in worship do we enliven these sort of things? Are we engaged relationally? Are we, expressing points of creativity and innovation? And as I'm a practical theologian, and I focus on Christian discipleship and spiritual formation, Christian education, that sort of thing. And for me, that process of growing and learning and being a disciple involve sort of interactive activities. And it was sort of a critique of just coming to church on Sunday and letting that be your spiritual input in your lives. I don't think that's sufficient. I'm not saying you can't grow as a disciple outside of that, but I think what an opportunity we have with games that bring all of these aspects of the image of God to the surface and enliven them in us. And so that's why I started teaching. But to be honest with you both, over the last years, I said my mother has vascular dementia. And if you're not familiar, for those of you, what I've discovered is a lot of people don't know a lot about dementia. Dementia just means your brain is dying, that something is going to lead to your death because of the deterioration or death of your brain. And Alzheimer's is a long journey to dementia. Vascular dementia deals with your cerebral vascular cortex that is not functioning. You have Lewy body that's more like Parkinson's. It can come through diabetes and alcohol. Anyway, all that's to say is my mother had this vascular dementia that affects her procedural, her executive function parts of her brain. And as I watch her decline and her brain turn to the mentality of almost a 2-year-old or a 1.5-year-old, like legitimately, like the behaviors were strikingly similar. In the thinking and the process, I started to think, well, if someone doesn't display creativity or innovation or rational thought or self-reflection, Is it about the potential to have those things? And so I've sort of been toying around with the idea of the image of God not necessarily being our rationality, because that means in a case of a child or in a case of a deteriorating older adult, when we no longer see that trait exemplified, does the image of God, does that mean there's less image of God in them? So I'm a little cautious about assigning. I think the image of God includes play, and my theology of play would fundamentally be we were created to play. We were created to be in relationship, in this perichoretical relationship with God. I often talk about the perichoretical relationship being a holy dance or a sacred dance between that Trinitarian God. And when they imbued the image of God in us, they invited us into that dance. Um, but I don't think any longer that dance requires um, logic or rationality or creativity, because I think those are things that are given out in different measures throughout humanity. There's got to be something more, but I still would hold on to the idea that we were created to be in a state of play, not I think one of I've read many books over the years on play and theology of play or philosophy of play, and one of the things that has always stood out to me is play is inherently intrinsic. It has no extrinsic sort of goals, or like when your game is done, that's it. That's the
Yep.
game.
Yep.
And so the reason you're playing is maybe even for I would say for gamers who are more competitive, it's just to win. But the truth is, you're really not there just to win. You're there to engage in an activity. So for me, that desire to be present, the desire to be engaged, the desire to be enlivened and have your spirit enlivened and your faculties, stimulated and engaged, that is the part of our image of God or our likeness of God that comes to the surface for me. And I think, if you're a Christian and you've been given these gifts and you know that you have this capacity, and we know we believe in the resurrection of the body and the kingdom comes, so we don't have to worry about the future, and we can live a faithful life of proclamation and also live in the fullness of who we were created to be, in the image of God or the likeness of God, however you want to call that, but in that spirit of play.
Thanks for being willing to share some of the story of your journey with your mom. I mean, that's a powerful and a hard journey, and I think I hear you saying in that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that so whereas at one point maybe in your life you would have said the theology of play is more centered around like the capacity to be rational, curious, innovative. It's now, did I hear you use the word presence? And maybe that's is that would you say that's the essence of play? Some sort of way of being present to one another? That's the image of God we're talking about, or is it
I
something
think
else?
in a broader sense of playfulness, yes. And
Mm.
I want to say that we define play when we sit down to a board game as I'm playing this. There's this thing I'm manipulating. There's boundaries. There's limits. You get into the philosophy of play. There's limits. There's boundaries. You're participating in this category of what if, like what if I were living on an island and I had to settle it, or what if I had to, build a walled city, or whatever it might be. All of those things aside, I think they're tapping into the same essence of being, and that is presence in the moment.
That's so interesting. Yeah,
You can sit, my sister, who will never listen to this probably, so I'll say this about her. My older sister does not like board games, and she gets anxious and antsy, and it makes it no fun for other people. It's not, I believe she's not sitting in the presence of the moment and saying, I'm going to put aside what was in my life or happening earlier. I'm going to forget what's happening after. And in this, this moment, in this period, in this liminal space and time, I'm going to give myself to this. And the reward is presence.
I love that.
So,
I love that.
That actually, yeah, we've explored some of these topics, because once you start thinking about created to play and interacting with people and connecting, but I had not thought of this idea of presence. But you're right. I can see the one shadow side of it, which is you get anxious about your performance. So you have to get over performance anxiety. You have to accept the fact I may lose and lose badly.
yeah.
But if you get past that, all your other worries, you forget that you've got to pay the phone bill tonight, right? Like because you're all you care about is this stupid bit of cardboard, and it's like ridiculous. And that's why it works, because the whole point of it is that it's kind of pointless. Like it doesn't matter what you're doing.
And I think some personalities lend themselves. I think there's, it's like Aristotle's golden mean, the sort of the middle of finding that sense of balance. I think there are gamers who are hyper competitive and who, books talk about them. They play a game, and my wife's that way. She's a perfectionist, and if she plays and there's a move that she rushed or thought she should do something else and ended up doing something, and then she'll go back to that for days later. She'll hold on to something.
Yeah.
I don't have that in me. I'm like, I'll try something out, and if it doesn't work, that's okay, because I know that I'm going to play another game. And I think in a culture that plays games maybe once a week at most, maybe sometimes in most American families that aren't gaming families, I would suggest they play, less than a half a dozen games a year. Well, when you have such a limited opportunity exposure to play, then the need to win or to sense of doing well in those tests, those mini tests, are so important to the person. Whereas, I've raised my 14-year-old from the time my wife allowed me to put dice in his hand, I did. We play games constantly. We play games daily. And so at some point he's like, I didn't win this game, I'll win the next one. If I don't win the next one, then I'll win some. Now he does win more than I'd like him to, but that's what happens when you raise a kid as a gamer. So
that's right.
As an 11-year-old, he was playing in the online root tournament. So
wow,
right.
So go ahead, Kevin.
And so you've taught classes as well, Jason, on this topic.
I've taught, I would say, more workshops. I've been teaching about a theology of play since about 2016. Long before we ever started TopCon, I would, you apply to teach something at a conference. We have a big conference in the Presbyterian Church called APSE, the Association of Presbyterian Christian Educators, and it draws 800 plus to cities around the world, and I started teaching there. And when people started seeing what I was doing, then they started asking me to come to their church. So I've been to presbyteries, I've been to larger churches where I helped them start game nights. I'm very involved in the intergenerational formation conversation that's happening, that also got kind of stymied in COVID, but is resurfacing again. And that's just the idea of age and stage ministries have not succeeded in doing what we thought they would do, and perhaps an all age intergenerational worshiping body is what we need to return to. But within that, I have a chapter in a few articles out there, but I have a chapter in one of the intergenerational books about the intergenerationality of gaming, in which I would argue that it's one of the most intergenerational activities that we could, meaningful activities that we could actually have multiple generations participate in, because you can have a 7-year-old and a 70-year-old, with millions in IRAs, and a 7-year-old with 50 cents in the bank. And in that hour-long game, actually, I realized this when my son, who was, I think, 9 at the time, or I don't remember, he was young, and I think he was 7 at the time, and my older son was like 18, and then my mom was like 70 or something like that. And I remember thinking, we were playing Dinosaur Tea Party, and I remembered thinking, everyone at this table has a chance to win. It doesn't make a difference who you are, how much education you have, what your financial status is, what your social status is, how many degrees you have. When you sit down to that game, it is the great. It's like baptism in the Eucharist. It's a great equalizer. There's not to say it should be raised to the level of sacramental, but
well, you're among Methodists, so you're fine.
We don't know what we believe.
That's right. That's right. I know. I think we've even said that before, and there is something almost sacramental about the gifts of play in games. That there is this kind of this sense of broad welcome and inclusiveness and grace that it offers to, and the only requirement is that you want to participate in it. I mean, that's it, right? There's nothing else. Right.
It's certainly an element of spiritual connection to others, in the sense of bridging a gap and finding similarities with another human being, and the magic circle, right? You're entering the magic circle. We will do this ritual thing where we will take this and do this, and then the ritual ends. You put it in a box and you leave.
Yeah.
The mass is ended. And from
If everyone steps into, I feel like I see the magic circle as a chalk line, and some people are like, full, both feet jump in, they're standing in the middle, and they're like, let's get going. And other people are like, I'm going to leave 1 foot out of the chalk line. And it's really, I love the notion of the magic circle. But it's kind of like they're half participants. I guess that's true for, you could say that's true for spirituality too.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something, Presbyterians, I think I'm not sure 100% on Methodists, but I know, it's not, Catholics have transubstantiation, Lutherans and Episcopals have consubstantiation, still real presence in the Eucharist. Presbyterians, I'm not sure about Methodists, but I would include maybe you all in it, is the idea of spiritual presence, that in the moment of you receiving the Eucharist, that the Spirit is present. And that means that the sacramental offering is participation by the individual. You fully participate, and in doing so, you receive the seal of the covenant on you in that moment. And I would say, to make a parallel to the game, if you're half playing a game, you're not involved. You got, your mind in something else that's before or after going on in your life, and you're not invested in the game. Others can feel it. You don't get the benefits of the game. You're half present, and in that notion of the benefit of a game comes in full participation, in the same way the benefit of the Eucharist comes in the fullness of your participation.
Oh, that's lovely. It's lovely.
It is.
In Methodists, actually, we share Calvin's understanding of what happens in Holy Communion, because that's what kind of won the day for the Anglicans, Episcopalians, and then Methodists came out of that. So the idea of real presence, real spiritual presence. Yeah.
So I want to ask about also your work as a hobby board game designer. And I know before offline, and you talked about the gamification and finding, value in using games to make life better in certain ways. But you were saying a little bit, please, about this concept of gamification, what it means, and how you have applied that in your work or in your life.
Oh, I think it's changed the way I think. I'm a longtime listener to the Board Game Design podcasts with Gabe Barrett. Highly recommend. He's actually a fellow Christian. He was a missionary, I think, in El Salvador, maybe, or it was a Central American country somewhere down there. But and now actually lives out of Atlanta, but still runs, and he's done a lot. I mean, he's he's got the Southern drawl, and he's amazing. But I started doing game design. I don't know. I sat down with a game, and I was like, what makes this thing tick? And I started picking it apart, and then I started getting into game design. And the more you get into game design, you start to realize like when I sit down to a board game, the questions I'm asking are not the same questions that, a non-thinking board game design, hobby game designer would think, or someone who's thinking about games. Because I'm asking like, well, how does this mechanic work? And what's the relationship between this mechanic? And why did they choose this? And why did they make this choice? And so it is, I mean, this is, so practical theology, not a lot of people know what practical theologians do. They hear that they think like it's applied theology. We just take the theology and apply it to the church. But we're actually trained in methodology, in hermeneutics, and what we're trained to be interdisciplinarians around the field of theology. So instead of a social scientist or as a sociologist of religion, where you would study the phenomenon of religion from an outside perspective and sort of look at the sociology of it, we're the flip side of that. We study religious phenomenon, but we also study social sciences and hard sciences and philosophy and other fields of study. And we say, how does our understanding of religious phenomenon, how is it informed by these other fields of social sciences? And we sort of created an interdisciplinary dialogue between them. So in many ways, I took my practical theological sort of mind thinking around that I usually apply to the church or to spirituality, and I started looking at games through that concept and saying, what is present here? What does it play psychologically? What does it play relationally? What does it do to me, as a person and my sense of self? And as I started thinking about these things, it just sort of exploded. And I have dozens of of completely finished prototyped games with rules, and that's and then that's the sort of threshold. And honestly, in the last 10 years, as I'm sure you've heard people say, we're in this board game renaissance. There's like 600 plus games coming out every year. 10 years ago, if I, or 10 year or a decade previous would have been a great time to publish games because,
Right.
Publishing houses were popping up. People were looking for them. But in the past 10 years, the market has been saturated. And really now we're in a place where there's an oversaturation as well. Like you were saying earlier, the FOMO mentality of I don't want to miss out on this game. I got to buy it, and I got to buy every expansion that comes with it. And I may never play it, but it's like it's collecting cards or collecting things. And but all that's to say is getting into game design changed the way I viewed the world. So I walk anywhere I go, walking through the airport, I'll say, okay, I see some, people are walking here, walking the moving walkway, they're moving faster. Well, that is an implement you put in to give someone an advantage. And if they're in the right place at the right time and they don't have to cross over a huge, I'm making this off the top of my head, so it may not be the greatest example, but instead of crossing like 5 or 6 people to get on the walkway, they just continue walking forward. But then the person who's in front of them, you see them speeding ahead, and then all of a sudden you say, well, what is that? Well, that's in essence, that's a life mechanic. It's a life, it's an avenue or a pathway through which you can strategically advantage yourself through. And I think that when you start looking at games, whatever it is, driving, I was thinking about plumbing the other day, and I was like, can you create a game where you're, pushing water through different tunnels, and you need to fix your pipes, and you need to fix these certain junctions. And if you can create junctions between here, you can make it more efficient. And the goal is to get, and then I was like, you know what? No one wants to play a game about plumbing. Because no one wants to deal with plumbing. We pay plumbers $150 an hour because that's a crappy job, pun intended. But no one wants to play it because games do give us this sense of what if. And that's what I love about it. I love the transformation aspect of it. So the gamification not only comes through how I think about life, but it filtered into how I think about Christian formation. And
that apply to Christian formation
across the board. There are games that changed our perspectives. I've never used it, but I remember a game that I think it was something Games that Transform. It was a while ago that I saw this, but it was a game basically that said, hey, your job is to get as many people on this train as possible. And you're like playing this game, and you're gathering people and you're shoving them in this train. And then about halfway through, you realize you're a Nazi sending people to concentration camps. And then there's this emotional, moral conflict in you. Like, well, I don't care if it's a game. I don't want to simulate that. I'm going to try to get as many people out of the train. And it almost changes your perspective. Those are transformative games that can be used, but there's also, even in the realms of, and again, I've created a lot of Christian formation games. I have one that centers around the Last Supper and who sits next to Jesus. And basically it's a game of manipulating these little discs that have the disciples' heads with little light, like the icon, light shimming from their face, and you're moving their faces to try to get, and you're one of the disciples, and you want to sit as close as you can to Jesus because there's more points closer to Jesus than away. And then you have Judas and, a few other things that factor into it. But all that's to say is, it's a game that you may not say you're learning anything by, but if kids were to play it, they would have a card that tells you about the disciple. They could read, "This is my disciple." They can learn a sort of a flow of the Last Supper where at some point Jesus says this, and then at this, and then Judas leaves. You can flow that. You could, there are things that you can embed and gamify within our learning and within our daily lives that actually allow for formation in a passive way. That's not, I think the minute you make a game educational, it kind of breaks the game down.
right.
Actually, one of the best games, if you've never seen Her Story,
I've heard of it. I have a friend who's a big fan of it. I haven't played it myself.
Oh, you should get it. Yeah. Just in terms of, you should really, it's a great game. It's a simple game. And it is the perfect example of how a game can be educational. It's kind of like Wingspan. Wingspan is educational because you're, while you're waiting for your turn, You're looking at your cards. You're looking at the back of them.
Yeah.
Not that you're remembering any of it, but you're engaging more in the world of birds than you
You're
would have been
more
any
interested
other
in birds
day.
than you began at the beginning of the
Right.
game. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So gamification is a way of viewing life. It's a way of viewing teaching. I try on my formation, do little activities, and sometimes I feel more like activities than games, but,
Yeah, no,
I'm working on something called a connection deck for Sparkhouse right now, and it's 52 cards that have pictures on one side and words and symbols and things on the other. And for basically, I'm creating it's a 56 card deck actually, and I will build 10 games out of it that are meant to connect confirmands together. And again, it's the gamification of a deck of cards. What can you do with 52 cards or 56 cards that will get, if the goal is to get junior hires connecting one another, sharing about their feelings, sharing about where they're at in the day, sharing about what's happened in their week, then you say, what are 10 means through that?
And I like how that connects back to what you're saying earlier about maybe, the essence of play being this presence to one another. I mean, that kind of connection deck sounds like, that's the whole purpose of that. Yeah. Just making
it's the Mary Martha
thing.
thing.
Present. Yeah.
Mary was playing. Mary wasn't playing, but in the spirit of playfulness or in the spirit of presence, Mary sat with Jesus.
Yeah.
Martha was like, I have external goals that need to be accomplished. Let me go run around and accomplish these things for the sake of, a perceived expectation.
Right.
Whereas Mary's like, I just want to sit with you. I just want to be with you. I just want to embrace this moment. And I think games give us, going back to the TopCon conference, games give us places of connection that we would otherwise not have. Last year at TopCon, Phil Walker Harding came in and he talked about different types of games and cozy games and the way we describe games these days. And he was making the comment that if we know that games connect us in this way, we know that they engage us in this way, that we all these benefits that, from, endorphins to dopamine to relational connections to shared narratives, all these things are a part of our gaming experiences. If we know that, and we know that there's good from that, why don't we sit down to games more?
Mm-hmm.
And I say that within the Christian church. Like, I think every church should have a great game group once a week.
Yeah.
Because it gives an opportunity for every person in that church to be invited into a connection in a relational space, an opportunity to build a relation. And you know what? You play a game with someone on a Monday night or some night of the week, and then you see them in church. You're going to have a shared experience that after one night, you'll be like, hey, that's the person I played Settlers of Catan with.
You're closer to that person.
When they pulled out
that
Monopoly card and took all my wheat, I hated them for that night, but now I feel close to them.
Right.
It reminds me, I don't know if you're familiar with the Reality is Broken by Jane McGonigal, but it's a book that we've discussed a little bit on this podcast as well. And she, very much this idea of the value of gamifying life. And she's not coming necessarily from a religious perspective, but yeah, just
no, she's not at all. But
no,
but here's the dark side of that I have been thinking about recently is that so much of public school education now, and I've got two kids in it, is gamified, but in this video game type way. So much of public school, and I hate to say it, it's just our experience, but teachers are really just giving kids websites that get them to do these little activities and games. And so they might be racing a car, right, that has a number thing, like a geometry dash is like a classic, right? And I guess it's school adjacent, but the problem is then kids are not able to be present, as we're saying, or to think on a deeper level or consider. They just expect that dopamine hit. So how do we encourage something different? And part of it is what my own kids have seen, because they are used to gaming and playing good games and interesting games. They're not as hardcore. They've kind of a little grown out of it. But if they try to introduce a game to their friends, they really can't do it. They end up grabbing their phone. So it's a different type of game. It's a dopamine rush video, flashy thing versus a, how do I, right? So Jane McGonigal's doing something different with gamifying, hopefully, even though she's a video gamer herself. I don't know.
Well, I
if
think
you
the
all have
worlds
thoughts.
overlap too, because there's a sense of, again, a goal that doesn't really matter in the end. Although, and the challenge is the board game world and the video game world, while their Venn diagram overlap a little bit in
Sure.
terms of goals or objectives, the interaction is entirely different. And I do think that there are online forums where you get in, like I played those with people too. On Root Tournaments, you're on a Discord channel that you can talk through, and you're engaging in that way. But I still go back to the idea, that the gathered body is essential because the spirit moves. I mean, unless you're completely devoid of a pneumatology and you just reject any notion of the spirit, going back to that presence, when we gather together in a place and we feel the emotions and we feel the presence and we feel the excitement. And I, it came to mind a second ago. I don't know if you've played Flip 7.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Flip
Yes.
7?
A lot. Yeah.
At our last TopCon, I played that, and then I ended up making it our tournament game, and actually the great people from OP Games, shout out to them. They sent us a case. They sent us 32 copies of promotional copies for the conference for free of charge. They just sent them to us because they wanted to support it. But in the meantime of that conference, after we had the conference, it was nominated for the Spiel des Jahres, the German Game of the Year of the award, and it did not make it. Bomb Busters won, and I think that's a well-deserved award. If you haven't played Bomb Busters, it's fantastic.
It's a great game. Yeah.
I continue to say I think that Flip 7 is the perfect youth group or ministry board game for a variety of reasons.
It's so good.
But we had over the summer our Presbyterian Youth Triennium, which is like 3,000-4,000 young people who gather, and this year we did it in Louisville, and I taught a class called "God Wants You to Play More Board Games," and I talked about a theology of play. I actually had this. I had this 4 foot. I kid you. I had this 4. I should give you a picture of it. I had this 4 foot high board that says nothing on it than "God wants you to play more board games."
That
and
could
I
be
was
the
like,
name of this
home
podcast.
with me?
I love that. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Well, then I'm walking through the Denver airport with it, and there's no way to hide it. So it looks like I'm some religious fanatic, and it's bright pink with these, colorful letters, and so I'm walking, and everybody is looking at me, and so I've never been both so proud of what I was sending out into the world, and also a little embarrassed. They're like, this guy seems like a religious fanatic. Anyway, all this to say is, I taught about 300 kids Flip 7. And I'm convinced that Flip 7 is really an ideal game because it has, this goes back to the video games. Video games, you sit down and yes, there's a little bit of hand-eye coordination. You got to figure out which button is which, but once it's captured it's got a quick entry point. For the most part, you can move around, you can understand the basics of it. You're engaged immediately. There are so many games that are so hard that you can't teach before youth group that no one wants to play after because it's more of an event or an activity. You sit down, you got to invest in it. How to learn to play, how am I going to play is, you better if you know it, but if you don't, you learn it first time. Flip 7, you don't even have to explain the rules.
No.
You just give someone a card and be like, okay, well, you don't want that same card again. You can either hit or stay, and that's it. And then the specialty cards you can explain as they come out. But I love that.
Yeah.
For the same reason you talked about video games, because it is an invitational. You hear people laughing.
Yeah.
I remember board game. The guy who does Board Game Geek reviews.
Eric Martin.
Whatever. No, he's the
Eric.
one. I don't know whatever his name is.
Brothers Murph.
He was saying that he was reviewing, and I was listening to his review, and he said he whatever he was at, they were playing, and he went up into his room and he had a conversation or something to have, and then he came back down, and all he heard as he was walking toward the room was this burst of laughter.
Yeah.
And he just said it gave him such a big smile on his face. And I was like, oh, yeah, that was my experience playing Flip 7. So, I gave a little 10-minute lecture about Flip 7 before we did this tournament at the last TopCon. And then I just walked around the room and sort of listened. And what I heard was the exact same phenomenon. Mm-hmm. Quiet, play. Ha, 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 ha. Everyone's throwing a laugh. And that is such a powerful bonding experience.
Yeah.
Joint laughter. And it didn't make a difference who won in that game.
No.
It was just like if someone was able to get 7 cards, even if you were about to lose the game, the stakes were so low that it just gave you this sense of joy and elation. And holy cow, we need that more in our culture today.
Yes, absolutely. Amen. And the genius of that game is it's mostly luck, right? Mostly luck, but it puts someone on a stage. So everyone's watch, and Daniel and I talk about the role of luck in games and Ameritrash versus Euro. And so it's like, will Daniel take another card? So it's almost like a game show.
Yeah,
Will you
yeah.
try again? Will you spin the wheel? Or it's a bit like a craps table or poker table, right? Like you're
Yeah.
going to do it. And either way, it's a win for the table. Either like, oh, we
That's right,
got it,
that's right.
or oh no, right?
Either
And
way,
so
it makes a good
that's
story.
the joy, right? I think,
Yeah.
and then you just keep doing that over and over again. So it's
Yeah.
it's great for shy people because they
Yeah.
don't have to just like, all of a sudden everyone's having fun with them and they didn't have to talk. Yeah, it's great.
I wish we could keep talking about this forever. Unfortunately, it looks like we are approaching the end of our time together.
That's
but
right.
But Jason, one more time, please. How can people connect, sign up for TopCon, please?
Honestly, if you are on social media, Facebook is probably the easiest way. That's where we don't update the site a lot, but that's where it's a definitive place where we put everything. But if TOPCON, and you'll see it as I think the picture says TopCon, a Theology of Play Conference in the banner. That's probably the most effective way. If you are not on Facebook, however, Stony Point Conference Center in Stony Point, New York it's the National Conference Center for the Presbyterian Church USA. And they have our history there. They have what the conference is like. They have the schedule. The conference is $350, and that includes 11 meals and all of your conference fees and a free copy of Keep the Faith. And then housing is in addition to that. You can either have a double or a single room, or you can stay off campus and do a commuter. The commuter fee is free. You just pay the conference fee. But with the code PLAYSAVES, you'll get $50 off the top of that purchase. And most people are flying into Newark, and then we're going to ride share to get into Stony Point. And I'll say this: it's January 19th, which is a Monday, through the 23rd, which is a Friday. And we did it last year. We did 2 full days. This year we expanded to 3 full days because honestly, people were like, oh, when it came to the night of the second night, full night, people were like, we don't want to go.
Yeah.
We just want to remain here and dwell in this space. And honestly, that was the beauty of it. I mean, people were playing till 2 a.m. They get up and it is, if you like to play games, if you like to talk about faith, if you like to talk about religion, and the theology of play. We have morning prayers every morning. There have keynotes, there's workshops, we have gathered meal times. It's a beautiful setting, and so it's one that you leave. Someone put it last year. You normally go to a conference and you make a half a dozen friends that you get their numbers for, and you're like, you know what, I'd like to keep in contact. What I saw last year was, a dozen plus folks gather together who are still in contact and who are excited to join together. And my hope is, we've been a small Presbyterian gathering, and my hope is that through your listeners and through conversations, that maybe we can expand this to a multi-denominational, multi-traditional. I'd like to get all the folks together. And I said this to you all before, you have you're giving such a gift to the world of those of us thinking about the theology of play and how that impacts our lives. And I'm thrilled to both be on here. And I'm thrilled. I've been listening to what you guys are doing, and I love that it's out there. I love that you have listeners. I think the more we can raise the bar and the awareness of the importance of play in our lives, the more we can get people playing board games to experience that very real and authentic relationality and connection and presence. I think the more we shed light into this world. So thanks for doing that. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks. Thank you so much,
lovely.
Jason. Amen and hallelujah and all of that. Thank you. Thank you
Yes,
very much.
yes,
We appreciate the kind words.
Always great to find kindred souls. And how great would it be to be at a convention where you get to do a little worship service, prayer service, and then game? That sounds amazing.
It's amazing. It's all of life
That's
in
heaven.
nature. That's right. It's heaven.
Pretty
That's
great.
right. That's
Pretty
right.
great.
That's heaven. Well,
All
thank
right.
you. Kevin, anything else from you?
Yeah, I will put links to all those things in the description, and also the podcast details. You'll be able to click on those and follow those links, and remember that code. which is PlaySaves for a discount.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks so much. All right, listeners, viewers, thanks so much for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it. We hope that you have a great day. And yeah, we look forward to being with you again soon. Bye-bye.
Yes. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.